Hello and welcome to the new episode of the Tigers Down Under. Another episode for another week, and I have Logan with me. How are you, Logan?
I'm doing well, Alex. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to be here. I guess another week, sort of similar to last week, where we've had sort of mixed fortunes as City. We had a win in the league against Swindon, which was nice to get revenge on them, but then unfortunately went down to Lincoln City in the EFL Trophy, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Um, Overall thoughts on the week that we've had?
I think the overall thoughts would have to be the success in the league are still taking the primary focus for us at the moment. And so the fact that we were able to pick up crucial 3 points against a far lesser opponent, which we all know this season has been our Achilles heel, so to speak, with a lot of games dropped and points dropped to those, I guess, respectfully lesser opponents. And so to pick up the result on the weekend against Swindon was a crucial one. And certainly as you watch the game, you really got the feeling that that City were a cut above and were given so much space, particularly in that first half. And so when you see our team kind of flourish in those moments, but not being able to capitalize, particularly against those opponents, you start to worry and think, is this going to be another case of a missed opportunity against the team that we really need to be picking up the point? So although it got a little bit nerve-wracking towards the end, just because with that second goal didn't come, overall, I think it was a pretty polished result, given the fact that it was 3 points and a clean sheet. Probably not in the manner that we would have loved it, but nonetheless, it's still crucial.
Yeah, and look, it was great to see Doherty off the mark pretty early in that game after just 5 minutes to sort of settle the nerves. And I saw a stat during the week. I think in the entire football league, only Manchester City have taken the lead first in games more than we have. So we're clearly very adept at taking the lead in games, and we did again against Swindon, which was great to see. I guess as you're saying, I mean, the frustration was just the fact that second goal didn't come. And look, it was great to see Crowley. I think had a great game. I think he was creating a lot of chances, and there was a sense that there was a goal coming for him, or at least an assist coming for him, and it didn't quite materialize. But lots of positive signs. I feel like we're sort of a broken record this season, though, that there's all these chances that we're creating and we're just not able to finish teams off. And I think at this level, maybe it's not hurting us as much. I know last season and the season before, to an extent, we were, well, all the way back to the Slutsky reign, I guess, we were dropping a lot of points through sort of late conceded goals, which maybe is not happening so much at this level, but it's certainly something that we've got to be mindful of if we are looking to take that step up next season, that we do need to start to finish those chances and really kill off games.
Yeah, certainly. And I think that it probably is a testament to the, I guess, the quality of defending in League One. It certainly doesn't compete to, I guess, the heights that we're used to seeing in the Championship and the Premier League. So, as you mentioned, we do get let off in some respects. Like, even when we do score first, as you've mentioned, and concede a goal, you never really feel that the momentum shifted too much. You always kind of get that inkling that we are still odds-on favourite for another goal. And I think that is probably reminiscent of the story of the league so far, is even when we do score and get scored against, we still back ourselves and back the quality that we do have in the squad. And perhaps you maybe don't get given the same opportunities in the Championship when those momentum swings really seem to test us, and particularly not just in the individual game itself, but we see those momentum shifts throughout the season, and you go on those really bad runs, and it's really difficult to stop the rut. Whereas I think in this league, with all due respect, you can play one of the top teams the week earlier and have a bad result, and then really fancy your chances against a far smaller opponent the week after. So yeah, it's a really interesting league, and I think that it's been a big learning curve for City fans and certainly the players as well, as they've adjusted. It's been a positive season, but at the same time, it certainly hasn't been a season without blemish, which is an interesting position to find ourselves in.
Yeah, I mean, look, certainly it's an interesting league, and the fact that all the way down to, I'd say, Crew Alexander in ninth on 40 points, only 8 points behind us. Yes, granted, they've played a couple more games than us, but I think an aspect of this season that is making things interesting is the different number of games that every side's played. And I know in our sort of Facebook chat, we were talking during I think it was during the Swindon game, about the fact that I think, was it Lincoln lost to Doncaster or Peterborough lost to Doncaster maybe? And we were sort of, briefly, Lincoln lost to Doncaster, and we were sort of briefly celebrating that fact. But the point was made that Doncaster are now sitting in third, 3 points behind us essentially, but with 3 less games played. So it's a really deceptive table at the moment that I think if everyone was on the same games played, or maybe a couple of teams had a game in hand, it'd be a much easier table to read and to understand where we're actually sitting in the scheme of things. But I think at the moment, yes, we're sitting on top of the table, and it was great to get that win against Swindon, and I think we've got to keep getting those wins. But look, we've got a couple of huge games coming up, and obviously we'll talk about the Lincoln game in the league in a little bit, but then we've got Lincoln coming up, and then I think we've also got Doncaster coming up pretty soon as well. So a couple of huge games for us that could really define our season.
Certainly, and I think that's ultimately the biggest challenge that lay ahead for City is there's going to be a run of 6-pointers, and that will ultimately define our season. But as you mentioned, Alex, with some of these teams, if you look at the form guide, way down in 10th, you've got Oxford United, I think, who are maybe, I certainly know 5 wins on the bounce, but I think it's actually greater than that. To see a team like that performing, you alluded to a couple of podcasts ago when we lost to Shrewsbury at the time. They were one of the teams that were languishing down the bottom, but then they themselves went on a run. So, I mean, whilst we somehow discredit these dropped points against the lesser teams, it doesn't seem to be just us that's that's finding those challenges. And so ultimately, those 6-point games that do lay ahead, as you've already talked about, they are going to be hugely challenging. And in a strange way, I do have a kind of quiet confidence about the way that City approach those bigger games. And I do feel like perhaps they are, whilst they're difficult challenges, I do feel far more confident the players can get up for them and really, show their true abilities, I guess, if you will. In those type of matches, as opposed to the more, I guess, secretive, like hidden ones where the bottom left teams you should beat and appear like they will be easy beats, but just turn up with a very different attitude. And so it's going to be a very interesting couple of months, and particularly the next 4 weeks with those clashes that you've already mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. And look, I mean, Swindon in that first game of the season in October were one of those sides where, they were struck by COVID. I think their manager was out with COVID. A lot of their players hadn't had a chance to train, and they turned us over 2-1. I think we'd gone up 1-0, but then they turned us over. So it was great to get revenge in this fixture to get that win. I guess just talking about the game again, in terms of the changes to the side, we saw Burke come back in for Smallwood, I believe, who was rested, and Jones got pushed up into midfield, and Crowley got a start over Magennis. I guess maybe more relevant talking about the Lincoln game, but in general, what's your? I mean, I guess the question sort of answers itself with Jones now out with an injury, but what's your sense of Burke coming back into the side and how he's performed?
I think Reece Burke is a proven championship defender at the very least, and we've seen that quality throughout. I know that there was that controversial moment a couple of weeks ago where he bought the red card late in the piece, and there was that discussion of whether he should or shouldn't have. It was a slip mistake, and I think that moments like that remind us that Reece Burke, I don't feel is Premier League quality, but I certainly do think that the gap between the lesser defenders in League One and Reece Burke is quite large, and we're really grateful to have a player of his caliber. So I have no qualms at all with him stepping back into that spot, despite, as you mentioned, Alfie Jones had been playing fantastically well, and had really cemented his spot in some ways, although I guess the argument could be made that Greaves has been performing brilliantly as well. So what you do with City's backline at the moment is a really great problem to have. And the fact that we can have injuries in that kind of manner and know that the next person waiting in the wings is a man of Reece Burke's stature. So, it's a fantastic thing. We've even chatted with Geordie Device before he left the club.
Yeah.
The fact that he wasn't playing League One football is just perplexing, given the fact that the plaudits and the caliber of play that we've seen him be in the past. So, look, City's defence ranks at the moment are incredibly impressive, and down the stretch with those 6-point games ahead, it's exciting times.
Yeah, and I've got to agree. I mean, in the back of my mind, I do keep thinking with these sort of stretches of games coming up, I can't help but think that our depth of squad is really going to have us in good stead. And even we'll talk in a second about the EFL Trophy game, but even in that game, you look at sort of the players that we were bringing on late in that game compared to Lincoln's quality, and you just have to think that, considering maybe half a dozen of our better players sat out of that game or weren't playing in that game. And we still gave Lincoln a really good go. And yes, they might have been resting a few players as well, but there's just this sense that our squad runs a bit deeper than everyone else in this division. And, even if we do suffer a few injuries or players drop out of form, I think we've got the quality and the caliber and the depth to replace those players quite adequately.
Indeed, and credit has to go to the Allams, as much as it does make us want to bite our tongue and roll over and really struggle with, praising them, given the challenges that they have also created for the club. It's been a very successful window, and it was a successful window in light of a club that was already, we've talked about plenty of times on this podcast, a deep squad. And to look at the depth and the quality of that depth is remarkable. And as you said, I'm sure that there would be other teams, particularly in that top 6 at the moment, looking over their shoulder and green with envy at the squad that we do carry into to this division.
Well, absolutely. We'll move on to that Lincoln game in a second, but just before we do, I'll get your thoughts on the 3-2-1 MVPs for this match, and then I'll give mine.
Yeah, I think Doherty was probably the bright spot, just even if it was only for the goal. But I think he's been a really bright spot lately. Again, scoring this morning, although I know that we're talking about the game at the weekend. I thought George Honeyman again was just everywhere, and it seems to be the case. So I'd probably give him 2. A sneaky one, and I'm not sure if I can give the 1 point on one isolated moment, but in the lead up to Doherty's goal, the through ball that Callum Elder created was just incredible. And so he seems to be that sneaky defender who seems to really be coming along and growing in his game. I think the statistics of his assists and the role that he's played in creating a lot of City's goals this year certainly has, made him him on the radar, not only because he's an Australian, but because of the way that he's grown. And I mean, if we were talking about players who, if we don't end up getting promoted, and we do hope that we are, he would be a player that would be difficult to hold on to. I suspect there would be some huge championship interest in the way that he's been going. So I would give my 1 point to Callum Elder.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great shout. I think he's definitely one going under the radar. We sort of try and talk about him a little bit wherever we can, but I think with the focus on the right-hand fullback spot between Emmanuel and Coyle, I think people sort of lose sight of the fact that Elder's just going about his business and holding down that left back spot quite adequately. Look, I think I'll agree with you on the Doherty for the 3. I think that goal was really well taken, and he's certainly coming into some fantastic form for us, which is absolutely, we've seen throughout the season that he's got that in him. And I think now that he's starting to find the back of the net, the goals are coming with a bit more frequency. It's great to see. I gave the 2 to Crowley just because I think I've been really excited to watch him play, and I think seeing him get a start and what he was able to do in the side was really good to see. And I think he'll grow into that role quite a lot over the next few weeks and months with us. And certainly I'm hoping that once the season ends, if we go up potentially, we can make that a permanent deal, because he certainly looks a fantastic player and one that is, is sort of destined for bigger and better things, and is the sort of player that if we can grab and nurture and develop, then maybe he can sort of drag us along with him, sort of like Bowen was trying to do for a while there. And then I'll give the 1 to Honeyman. As you say, I think Honeyman again was fantastic. I was a bit surprised that he played after the concerns about any sort of potential injuries for him. So it was good to see that he got through that essentially unscathed, and then didn't play, or sat out of the game yesterday morning against Lincoln. So hopefully that makes him right for the weekend. But yeah, thought he was fantastic as well. But yeah, let's talk about that game against Lincoln. It was, I guess, a preview for the league fixture in a week's time. Played on a pretty chopped up pitch. It's probably the worst conditioned pitch I've seen at the KCOM in my time watching City. And it was an interesting one. It's a difficult one to read. We're disappointed, obviously, with the loss, but in terms of the 90 minutes, it was a 1-1 draw. Fantastic goal from Doherty again, very much a solo effort, getting through a few of the Lincoln players. But a bit poor from us on their opener, only 10 or so minutes into the game, 7 minutes into the game. So a bit concerning at that point, but we sort of leveled our heads and went on with it a bit better than we had been, and looked quite good for the majority of the game.
Yeah, after that slow start, you're right. It seemed that City, interesting to see how they were actually going to approach the game. I know that the Papa John's trophy is one of those, I guess, potential Mickey Mouse trophies in the sense that whether we were to lift silverware or not, I don't think is hugely relevant to the City faithful. I think we would far prefer the league, and so the cup is treated as such, as you said, with the changes. But yeah, the start was a little bit concerning, if nothing but the preview for the Lincoln fixture in a week. I guess it was that real kind of grudge matches, 1 versus 2, or they've seemed to be the top tier rivals for so long this season. And I think everybody has that fixture in the league circled. So for a pride perspective, but also, we're playing them shortly. So let's try and get one over them or set the tone and really start to feel them out. And so after that really poor start, it did create that concerning element of, like what's the varying degree between us and them. And so, yeah, after we shook those cobwebs off and started to play really good football, I do think we looked by far the better team. And, when, as you mentioned, the Doherty goal was fantastic, got us back into the fight. And then the penalty shootout taken in potentially the worst goal box I've ever seen for penalty conditions. And
what was it, 5 penalty misses in a row between the two sides or something like that?
It was something ludicrous, but I think even the fact is, in penalties, you expect your players to hit them most of the time. Every single penalty you could see was approached with a real, I guess, hesitance, and rightfully so, because there just it seemed really hard to kind of set that front foot and really generate some kind of power. So, yeah, look, once it got to that stage, I don't think we were too concerned, given the fact that 90 minutes was up, and if we went out, we went out, and inevitably that's what happened. But the performance overall, I think, was an encouraging one, and certainly didn't do us any real misfortune ahead of what's going to be a huge fixture in a week's time.
And I guess I saw on social media afterwards, and you've sort of alluded to it a bit there, sort of an atmosphere or a sense of a lot of City supporters not really caring about being out of the cup. Is that sort of how you see it, or do you sort of, because I sort of tweeted out to say, from my perspective, that look, at the end of the day, if we'd got to the final, it's a bit of silverware at Wembley that we're playing for, and how good's that? And as a City supporter, there hasn't been many opportunities in City's existence, really, where we've been playing for silverware at Wembley. It's just really the one game back in 2014. But yes, it's sort of a lower tier trophy in that sense. But where do you sort of weigh in on that?
Look, personally, I think that the COVID restrictions has a huge part to do with it. I think that a trip to Wembley for any City fan is a huge day out, and it would have been, attended in the masses, and people would have been really excited about it. But I think that the kind of importance of a cup like that only really becomes relevant once you kind of reach these latter stages. So, I mean, the quarterfinals was great, and potentially reaching the semis would have been an extra tier up again as far as enthusiasm goes. And I think that the hype train really might have started to kick in. But I think that the quarterfinals is probably that stage where we bowed out, and I don't think that too many people will be losing sleep. And I guess the litmus test is, if you were to say, would you prefer 3 points in the league fixture against them, or the win to go into the semi-final? Which one would you take? And personally, I would much rather the 3 points in the league. So
that's a good chat.
just a personal opinion, and I'm sure that there's probably people listening that are thinking, what a goose, but happy to wear that.
No. Look, I think it's a fair shout because I definitely sort of weigh in more on the side of I'd love to see us win some silverware. I think it'd be fantastic, and it would have been great to make the final. And I'm a little bit put off by people who sort of rubbish the trophy in that sense. But I also completely agree 100% that if you said to me, would you rather the 3 points in the league or to get through in the cup, I'd take the 3 points every day of the week. So I can't sit there and lie and say that I just want to go through in the cup. The league is definitely a higher priority. So it's a completely fair point to make.
And in no way, shape, or form is this a revolutionary, brand new point. But again, you've got to remember the depth that we do have in our squad, and the opportunity that these cup games do provide us to rotate that squad and give those players the chance to get some minutes under their belt. And I think that with all those factors considered, it weighs into just how important having these cups are. And I think that they're certainly by no stretch of the imagination a waste of time. There's a huge importance for them, but I just think as you creep along the fixtures and get into the latter stages, the significance of it seems to grow exponentially. Whereas if we had have bowed out of the Papa John's Trophy in the first or second round, I don't think anybody would even be mentioning it now.
Yeah, and look, I mean, you look at the fact that Slater started the game, Emmanuel started the game, Long started the game, McLaughlin started Ingram started the game, and McLaughlin started the game. They're all guys that, apart, Ingram aside, and I guess Emmanuel aside, except for in recent weeks, have not had a whole lot of football this season or football starts this season for McLaughlin and Slater in particular. So as you're saying, like it is hugely significant for guys like that to have these games, and it's going to be interesting to see if this bowing out of the cup sort of starts to impact how we rotate during the league games, whether we give Emmanuel more games in the league, or if a guy like him and a guy like Ingram are just stuck on the bench to start games for the time being. And whether Slater now might not even be making the squads on match days because we've got Flores and Clark and so on who'll be in the squad as well.
Is there a more unlucky right back in the entire United than Josh Emmanuel? I think that I would still have him in the top 3 conversation for our player of the season thus far. To see him sitting on the bench is it's just mind-blowing, and in no way, shape, or form is that because I think that Louis Coyle's position is unwarranted. It's just a hugely interesting predicament that we find ourselves in, and I do wonder what's going through Josh Emmanuel's head every week, going, what more could I do to put myself in the ring for a position in the starting lineup? From all reports, he's taking it incredibly well, but it's perplexing. What a player, and it's really sad that we just can't fit him in at the moment. Yeah. And well done to Louis Coyle.
Yeah, I can't think of a position in my time supporting City. I can't think of a position more hotly contested than this right back slot at the moment. I think back to the days where we had, I guess that second Premier League season under Bruce, when we had so many centre-backs that all deserved to start. And I guess that was a little different because there was 2 centre-back spots or 3 centre-back spots up for grabs, whereas this is just a single spot. But yeah, it's just remarkable that we've picked up 2 right-backs this summer who when you said, top 3 for player of the season, I thought you were going to say top 3 right-backs in the league. And I'd agree that both Coyle and Emmanuel are arguably in the top 3 right-backs in the league.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would really hazard anyone to find a better case than those 2 because of the consistent performances. We're not just talking about one-offs. It's week in, week out. And that's why, the fact that Emmanuel has lost his spot is an incredibly it's a strange situation. And I hold my hands up and I really do feel for Josh Emmanuel, but such is the time. And I guess if you're looking for a silver lining in all this, again, with the depth of the squad, if there were to be injuries further up the pitch, then you would have probably no hesitation in looking to play either Coyle or Emmanuel further up the pitch. It's just such is the way.
We saw the other week Emmanuel got thrown on late in the game up forward because I think McCann is thinking exactly that whether he uses Emmanuel further up the pitch is a way to get him game time. And you never wish ill on a player, but if there are injuries or illnesses or anything like that, it does at least lessen the headache and it makes the decisions a bit easier. But look, it's certainly a tough one for McCann at the moment because we've just got a fantastic deep squad. And it's a squad that we added to. So we'll move on from that Lincoln game. We'll talk about what an exciting end to the transfer window it was for us. Sort of one out, one in. But I guess all the focus was on the player coming in, which was Max Clark, who has completely blindsided, I think, every City supporter. I think there were a few who'd sort of jokingly tweeted out the fact that he was back in Hull. But I mean, we have to remember back in December 2019, he was being linked with both Leicester and Liverpool. He was being linked to Liverpool as the backup for Andy Robertson. He was being monitored for a potential England call-up. And at the time, I think there was a lot of statistics websites that were putting him as perhaps the best English left-back playing football at that point. I think he hasn't played football in about 11 months. I'm not sure if that's because there's been issues with Vitesse over there, or what's the case over there. But it's an interesting one, because when he first is announced, I assumed, it's a 6-month loan. But it looks like what's actually happened is that his contract's been mutually terminated with Vitesse, and he's signed with us on a short-term 6-month sort of basis. And I suspect that's sort of it's sort of like the Alfie Jones deal, I guess. It's sort of, if we go up, presumably he might sign on for a longer deal and try and push us even further up. And if we don't, then he'll find another club in the Premier League or in the Championship, having now got a bit of game time back in his legs. But what a fantastic signing for us.
Absolutely. It's a win-win. Bringing a hometown boy back into the squad, can do nothing but strengthen the feel around the place. Granted, I think the conversation between a lot of the guys in our podcast chat was, he probably won't know anyone.
Yeah.
Given the amount of turnover that's happened in recent times, and essentially we'll talk about it, I'm sure, with Batty moving on. Yeah. But it really just kind of shows the changes that have taken place in our City in the last 12 months, and 24 months really is that the period of when Clark went. But I think what the thing that scared us the most was when the club sent out the tweet that was kind of alluding to someone returning, and the speculation began. And I know the first name that we were secretly praying for was Abel, and we can all dream. But I think Max Clark would probably come in as a pretty close second. And the fact that he, as we mentioned, being a hometown hero, to come back with particularly the plaudits and the attention that he was getting prior to his departure, to a League One level, even if he has been, short-handed as far as games and time on the pitch in his football in recent times, to have him come back, I'm sure that there will be a huge element of him that just wants to see us get promoted and wants to be a part of that. And it's a huge boost for the squad and a great signing.
Yeah, and look, we've been sort of praising Callum Elder's form, but it now gives him a huge competition in that left-back slot. And I mean, Clark sort of in that first season under Slutsky was playing a little bit through central midfield as well. So whether he's another one of those players that's sort of brought in to give us that flexibility in midfield and give us a few more options, whether we just see him sort of coming off the bench, I guess, initially into one of those positions will be interesting to see. But as we say, it's a fantastic talent to have back in the squad, and will certainly boost the spirits around the training ground as we come into the end of the season. But as you say, when Clark was signed, I was sort of casting my mind around to think of who he might have played with in the current squad, and the only name that came to mind was Dan Batty. And I put a tweet out to that effect, sort of saying that, well, Batty's the only player he'll recognise, and only player he'll be familiar with, and went off to sleep and woke up to the news that Dan Batty had signed with Fleetwood. And I'd certainly jinxed that one greatly. So I guess we sort of had a sense that this was potentially coming. I think Batty only signed a 1-year extension last year and wasn't getting a whole lot of game time this season either. So a potential departure was always on the cards. Going to Fleetwood's an interesting one. Of course, they're our newest big rivals with the amount of games that we seem to be playing against them. And that'll certainly be an interesting one. And I guess I said 1 out, 1 in, but we also did loan out Samuelson to a Danish side, Aalborg BK. And Milinkovic's departure was also finally announced. Did you see that? Because Vancouver had to pay us they say it was a 6-figure sum. I'm assuming it's like £100,000 sort of thing. But then they released him like a day later or 12 hours later. I think because it was an obligation to buy him, and then they've mutually agreed to part terms with him. But typical sort of situation for him, I guess.
Yeah, I think Milinkovic seems to be in that Marcus Maddison bracket of untouchables now that seem to have that. The reputation precedes them, and whilst that there's potential there and can be a match winner, particularly at this level on their day, it just seemed to come with far too much trouble. And so I think too many clubs have had those similar experiences with them, and it doesn't seem to matter whether they go abroad or stay at home. It's just it always trouble seems to follow them, and to pick up that fee is great news for us.
Yeah. And so I guess overall, I mean, we brought in White, Crowley, Flores, and Clark, I believe. I don't think I've missed anyone. And then we've lost Adelican, Device, Samuelson all on loan, or I should say Adelican's loan finished, and then Device and Samuelson have gone out on loan. And then Milinkovic and Batty out on permanence. What do you make of the window? I mean, you sort of said before, I would say not just clubs in England, but clubs across Europe would be almost looking at us with envy in how much business we've managed to get done and how easily we've done some pretty great deals. Because you look even in the Premier League, there's very few permanent transfers have happened this window, quite a few loans or cheap deals. It was a very difficult window to operate in, and it looks like we've done brilliantly out of it.
Yeah, I would probably end up giving us like an A- if I had to grade the window. I think it was fantastic, and as I said, the addition to Clark is fantastic, and Crowley at League One is remarkable. I saw that a lot of Birmingham fans were kind of touting him as that he was going to be a £5 million signing type thing, and so for us to coop those two players in itself is remarkable. And we've already seen what White's done since he has joined the club, and he's come in with a huge amount of promise and hasn't put a foot wrong since he arrived. So I guess you can offset the Adelican loan spell finishing, given the fact that White's come in and given us that extra attacking impetus. The only reason that I wouldn't say it's the perfect window is because I still believe that Geordie Device is or was our best centre back when he is fit and playing well. And so to see him depart is somewhat saddening. However, we've already talked about the depth that City have in their defensive ranks at the moment. And so, I mean, whilst it's sad to see Geordie go, given the fact he was a kind of a long-serving steward to the club in today's day and age with the amount of games he played, we are more than covered in that position. So it's been a great window, and I'm full of praise for what the Alums have done, and I think it's a really smart and studious bit of business.
Yeah, and look, I think like you, I'd be more concerned with the Defiance departure if Greaves wasn't playing as well as he is. I think it's shown that we do have those good stocks down back as well. So, look, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the summer, whether he does make that permanent move to QPR or what happens with that, whether, if we were to go up and whether we try to hold on to him and give him another go next season. Not sure. It could depend on, I think Burke's out of contract at the end of this season. It could depend on what happens with him. But I saw the tweet recently about the fees for Burke and Scott combined was something like £3.5–4 million, and the amount that we spent on Emmanuel, I can't remember who the players were now. It was like Emmanuel, Jones, and White. No, not White. Somebody else. But it was like £700,000 sort of thing. And like the benefit that we've got from playing these or finding these cheaper signings, you get the sense. I mean, when Lee Darnborough came in from, I think, Norwich or Burnley or somewhere, he was met with a lot of skepticism because he didn't have a great record at those previous clubs with his signings. And at least initially, it seemed like that was sort of following on with City. But in the last 12, 18 months, there's been certainly a lot more hits than misses in terms of the players that we've signed. And it really looks like we've started to turn a corner in our recruitment policy.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It reminds me in some ways, and some people may think this is a huge stretch, but when Steve Bruce came to the club and got that kind of that Irish English contingent of players and really bought that core with Quinn and Myler, Brady, and you could just see the kind of the attitude change in the way that I guess City had a far more guile about them and were more resolute in their defense and midfield, and they were just had that real working man kind of battle amongst themselves again. And I guess that with the type of signings that come in, and I don't know if that's just, simultaneous because it's League One, and that's kind of the type of player that you're looking for is that battler, and you see it week in, week out with the fixtures and the results that nothing's a given in this tier of football. But the type of signings, whilst they've come with a far different wage bill, they really have got that real working horse kind of approach again, and it's really nice to see. I mean, you cast your mind and look at the back line. I mean, you've got Max Clark, you've got Alfie Jones, you've got Jacob Greaves. There's some hometown boys back in the squad, and I
Louis
think
Coyle as well, yeah.
Louis Coyle to be playing in this tier and to be having such an influence of guys that genuinely care about the club. Keane Lewis Potter, we're not even mentioning that. These are people who genuinely care about the city and want what's best for the club. And to add players like George Honeyman, who offer that working class, even Magennis up the front, like they just fight, and that really is a testament. And I think in some ways speaks into the character of Hull as a place. Like City as a city is a real galvanized working class group, and they care about each other, and to see that is translating to the type of football is great. So it's really exciting for us when we talk about the turnover of players that we've seen there in the last couple of years, and particularly in the last 12 months with relegation, to see that the rebuild doesn't just seem like a band-aid fix. It seems like there is a little bit of direction and a bit of longevity that is kind of being attached to this. And all of a sudden we've got a team that we can get behind again. We've got a playing group that we like watching these players play again. And you can tell that there is a different feeling watching them week in, week out than perhaps what we felt towards the back end of the championship season.
Yeah, definitely. And it feels like there's a bit more of an identity to the side again. And you look at when Bowen and Grzycki left last season, and we brought in guys like Madison and there was somebody else as well. But those sorts of sort of more temporary signings, flashy signings that just didn't really have much interest in playing for City. And, you look at Madison now, I think he signed for Bolton on deadline day. So he's sort of bottom half of League Two. And he joined us in the championship thinking that he was too good for at that point, a relatively mid-table championship club. So it kind of just shows the attitude that's needed to succeed. And you look at guys like Doherty and Crowley, as you say, who are linked to championship clubs and took that step to come play for us. Max Clark coming back and playing for us when he was linked to, the champions of England not so long ago. And you see these guys sort of playing because they want to be playing and want to be getting the minutes in the legs and taking that step up with us. And that's the attitude that you need in your squad. And as you sort of talk about, having those homegrown players is the perfect way to go, because those guys will be fighting for the team. And you just look at the impact. We haven't even talked about the fact that perhaps the biggest signing of the January window was getting KLP to sign a new contract. And him coming back into the side has been a breath of fresh air and really revitalized the side as well. And, when you've got those sort of Hull lads playing in the side, that they're going to fight until the end, and they're not going to just sort of drop their heads and give up, in the tail end of games.
Absolutely. And I think this might refresh your memory as to when City did go down. David Myler, I think it was, that tweeted out and was just in kind of utter disgust for the performance and just the way that it seemed like, people had given up. I don't know, there's people in like City fans, like Craig Fagan was another one. There was huge people and huge identities around City who were, disgusted with the manner that we did go down. And so
it undid all their hard work,
That's right. And it was something that was built over a period of time. And so to see this group really, not just because of the results, I think that, it can be easy to say because the team's winning, we see them in a different light. But it's not about the results, it's about the performance. And I think that week in, week out, we're able to see that. And, and the fans are hugely encouraged by it, despite still having those blips on the radars. There's still the games that are hugely frustrating and, from a fan's perspective, know that City are capable of much better. But on the whole, it's a club we can be proud of, and I think that's the exciting thing for what is ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And just before we move on then and talk about the coming games this week, two big bits of news or two big sort of announcements. First of all, really thank you to everyone. I sort of noticed that we're getting close to 100 subscribers on our YouTube channel, and people have ticked us over. So we're over the 100 subscribers mark on YouTube, which is fantastic. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit the like button and also hit the bell. If you hit the bell next to the subscribe, it'll actually give you notifications when we go live. It means that we'll be able to get more people watching live and commenting and giving us feedback, which is always great. Always appreciate people watching along live, and dropping comments in is always a bit of fun as well. And the second bit of news is just by chance, I was looking at our old videos the other day and noticed that it's actually coming up to the 5-year anniversary of the podcast. So 13th of February, 5 years ago, was our first episode as we were sort of assessing our chances of promotion to the Premier League under Steve Bruce for the second time. Definitely doesn't feel 5 years ago that was taking place. But that means that next week it'll be a special 5-year anniversary episode. So it'll be Logan and myself, and perhaps, if we're lucky, a special guest as well. Will be making an appearance if all goes to plan. So hopefully people can tune in for that one as well. That should be an exciting episode.
Yeah, look forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so let's look ahead now. We've got 2 games between now and then. The first of which is against Burton Albion for a second time this season, I believe, playing under Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank for the second time in their existence. He has a good previous record with them. He was the one to get them out of League 2 for the first time and into League 1. So he'll be hoping to sort of repeat that and get them up to the Championship, I guess, in the next year or so, if he can do so. We've only played them 3 times, I think, or 5 times in our history, and we've got a victory over them on every occasion. So certainly a side that we like to play. I remember there was a game where, I guess obviously the most famous of the clashes with Burton would be the game where Jackson Irvine scored the fantastic goal and then got sent off and then managed to get signed by us a few weeks later. So there was that one. And I think the other game that season was like a 5-0 away victory where Grzycki might have gone a bit crazy with a few goals in that one. But, not in great form themselves. They've only got the 1 win in 5. And I guess sort of like Swindon, it's a game that we'd be looking at as a real chance to kind of keep the chasers at bay and stay on top of the league.
You would hope so, given the where they sit on the table. But if you look at their previous fixtures, I know there's been a couple of blowouts. I know that Lincoln destroyed them in the end of December. I think it was 5-0 or 5-1. I think they also maybe got beaten well by Oxford. But apart from that, there's been some really close games. I think they've had a few 1-0s and really don't look too far off the pace. So I think that their standing in the league could be a little bit deceptive. And obviously, this side of Christmas, and given the fact that they sit where they sit, we know what it's like to be in a relegation fight, and every single game is critical. And so let's make sure that this one is approached with a high degree of caution, because it does concern me.
Yeah. Look, it'll be an interesting one. I guess the other interesting element is the fact that we do have a couple of injuries to the side. I think Jones is probably still out. I think McCann said he was out for a 10-day period. And White looks like he's out for a couple of weeks as well. I think they said 2 to 4 weeks, which is a significant stint at this stage of the season. He's going to miss a couple of games there with that one, which is unfortunate. We sort of talked before about Honeyman not playing in the trophy game yesterday morning. Hopefully that means that he's, I was sort of looking at from the positive element that perhaps that means that he'll be fresh and ready to go on the weekend. Hopefully it doesn't mean that the injury is worse than we thought. I haven't really heard any updates on that side of it, but I guess in terms of changes to the side, in that case, Burke playing at centre back alongside Greaves. Maybe if Honeyman's fresh to go, he can go into midfield. I guess the interesting element we didn't really touch on with the Lincoln game is Richie Smallwood's form, and I think he was probably almost the worst performer against Lincoln, just in terms of a lot of his passes were quite loose. Missed the first penalty as well, though. As we said, it's a bit hard to fault the anything in the penalty shootout. I guess the reason I raise that is, would you consider bringing either a Slater into the game or a Flores into the game, or sort of shift that middle 3 around and put Crowley into that central 3?
Yeah, I think that probably seems to be the most logical change if one is to take place. I think Flores starting could be could be probably a stretch, just given the fact that walking into a team where he hasn't played any football, for him to fly in and start would be somewhat surprising. Personally, I think I would still stick with Smallwood, and give him the kind of the best part of the first half, and maybe make a change around the 60th minute, depending on how things are looking, and obviously whatever happens in the match script. But I would probably still be starting Smallwood. But I think that as you mentioned, that case for Crowley coming in is certainly a strong one, and I wouldn't be too surprised to see it actually happen.
I think a front three. I mean, look, if Crowley's not going to come into that middle three, he sort of started the last game in that front three with KLP and I think it was Wilkes. Which, look, I mean, I think that works. I think that was probably more out of the fact that we really wanted to give Crowley a go, and that was sort of the open position for him with White out injured. But I feel like, I mean, it's interesting that we sort of compare him to Honeyman's position, and I think that's probably the closest to his natural position, but he almost plays a bit like Doherty as well in that sort of box-to-box style, and that creative position. So it's interesting to see how he'd fit in and whether we'd get more out of him in that sort of central position rather than up forward. But I think you're right. I think if we're going to stick with Smallwood, Honeyman and Doherty as that midfield three, then he'll probably find himself forward on the left-hand side, and in which case it's really just the one change from the last game with Jones getting injured. I guess it would just mean Smallwood comes back into the side.
Yeah, and I think that if you're Richie Smallwood, you're probably very aware of the fact that your form probably hasn't been the greatest. And again, when we talk about the depth of the squad, the fact that we do have options and there are people kind of knocking on the door that, we can tinker with the formation. And despite the fact that he is the club captain, he's not necessarily safe. And, that can be a really, really positive thing for sparking a form increase in Richie, given the fact that he is a club captain and he's proven that not just at City, but also when he was at Rochdale. And so he's a competitor, and I would really love to see a strong performance if he was given the start, just for playing himself back into the team, so to speak, despite not actually losing his spot.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And then how do you see the score for this one panning out?
Look, as I mentioned, it is a game that concerns me, but I don't know if I've just got a overarching case of post-traumatic stress from earlier on in the season where we dropped some of those big games. I think City will get the right result. I do think we'll get 3 points, and I would love to see a blowout score similar to what Lincoln did to them. But I suspect this one's going to be a little bit closer, and I'm going to say a sneaky similar performance to the Swindon Town. I think it'll probably be 1-0. But my fingers are crossed. I think it could just as easily be a bit of a blowout. But I think my pessimistic side is keeping it close.
Yeah, I think a lot's going to depend on how Crowley sort of starts to click with his teammates. I think once he does, I think, you'll see KLP, Wilkes, Magennis, etc., starting to score a whole lot more goals, because I think Crowley offers that real creative spark. I think Doherty's in some great goal scoring form as well. Honeyman's even chipping in with a couple. He got the goal against Portsmouth as well. So lots of goal scoring options in the side. And, on our day, as you say, we can sort of blow teams off the park. And hopefully that's going to be the case against Burton. But I would just as happily accept a 1-0 scrappy win to get those 3 points on the board. Because I guess the more important game or the more significant game is the following game against Lincoln midweek. They're coming back to the KCOM, so hopefully the grass has been grown on the pitch and there's a bit of turf there, because look, I guess the most interesting element out of that trophy game was, we like to play a quick game on the counter attack, and I guess so do Lincoln. And the fact that it was so muddy just meant that neither side could really play their natural game. So look, it's going to be an interesting one. I suspect the pitch will still not be in great shape, but presumably a number of changes to our side, presumably a few changes to their side as well from that trophy game, makes it a bit of a different game in complexion. But how do you see, now that we've got our first glimpse of Lincoln this season, how do you see this one panning out for us?
It's always difficult to pick 2 games ahead, given the game script. We want to see what happens in the game against Burton first, obviously. But look, if we're drawing on the cup performance, I'm really confident. I think I've said it to you before, but I'm more scared of Doncaster than I am of Lincoln. Yeah. And I don't know if that's just a personal opinion, but I believe that outside of us, I think that the Doncaster and Portsmouth are the 2 best squads in the league. from what I've seen, despite Portsmouth's failing form of late. But I really do see the matchup with Lincoln as a positive one for us. And I wouldn't be surprised to see us win that maybe 2-0, which seems almost contradictory given the fact that I like our chances against Lincoln more than Burton. But I really do.
Yeah, look, and I can see why you would think that, considering the fact that, as you say, we do sort of turn up for those bigger games more so than necessarily we do for the smaller games. And I think outside of that first game to Portsmouth and that game against Peterborough early in the season, I don't think we've really looked out of place against those bigger teams. And even that Peterborough game early in the season, it was a very close one where we'd taken the lead. And that Portsmouth game, we conceded the 2 own goals. So, look, I'm probably inclined to agree. I think that cup game really gives me confidence in our ability to take it to them. I think it's great that guys like Honeymoon and Wilkes have had that rest and will be fresh for these couple of games. And I think it's a really vital chance to get 6 points on the board. And of course, if we're able to beat Lincoln, I think that takes away their kind of game in hand advantage over us, because at the moment we're a game ahead of them but level on points. So if we were to win this one, we'd then go 3 points ahead of them with them having a game in hand. So that would mean that, even if they were to win that game, we'd be ahead of them in goal difference. So from that point of view, it's a really vital game to win. And I guess similarly, in a few weeks when we play Doncaster, it'll be a similar sort of vibe. But look, I think it's a big game, and I think I'm inclined to agree. I think we can win that one and come away with the 3 points.
Yeah. And this weekend, don't forget, they're also, I think they're away to Gillingham as well. So they have a somewhat similar fixture to us in fighting against one of those lower languishing teams. So, I mean, there's nothing to say that they couldn't drop points there as well. And so it's a huge 7-day period. It really is to see. I think we will begin to start to see that top 6 really take shape in the next couple of weeks. And the run-in, I do think whoever does win that fixture between Lincoln and us next week will send a real clear message to the rest of the people the rest of the teams in that top 6 group, because even though it's still a long way to go, there is and so much football to be played. There is something to be said for being able to wipe away your rivals in that period where it is kind of that cutthroat. Everything seems to change so quickly, and games in hand, and COVID teams catching up. And I mean, Doncaster sit below us, but they themselves have 2 games in hand. If they were to win both of those, they would be ahead of Lincoln and us. So it's such a mishmash period that we find ourselves in, and wherever you can get those big victories, I think it speaks volumes.
Yeah, and look, I mean, talking about Gillingham, they're undefeated in their last 4 games. They've got wins against Crewe and Accrington Stanley in that. So definitely not in poor form themselves. So every chance that they take points off Lincoln in that game, which would be really important for us as well. As you say, there's still a lot of football to be played, but we can't help start to look at results elsewhere and start to hope that things can kind of go our ways and sort of help us get that bit of breathing room at the top of the table, because you spend so long at the summit of the table or around the top sort of promotion places, you sort of start to sort of look ahead to the end of the season and count down the games until we can sort of tick off promotion in that sense. But as you say, there's still a lot to go, and that game against Lincoln will go a long way to as you say, sort of sending out that message to the other sides about our intentions for the season and knocking off another rival, as we did with Portsmouth the other week.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems so long ago, but at the beginning of December, we were the team at the top with games in hand, and we kind of squandered our chances to create some space. So it seems to just be a bit of a leapfrog race at the moment, and there's some really exciting fixtures coming up in League One.
And absolutely, Burton won't know what hit them. So it's going to be a fantastic game on the weekend. Hopefully we can get the 3 points against Burton and follow that up with another 3 points against Lincoln a couple of days later. But looking forward to our sort of anniversary special episode next week after that Lincoln game. Hopefully we'll have 6 points worth of games to talk about after this 7-day period. So I'm looking forward to that one with you, Logan.
Yeah, it should be good. It'll be nice to reminisce on the highs and lows of this roller coaster of the last 5 years. Lots to celebrate and lots to bemoan. It's been some lonely nights back here, or early mornings, we should say. And it's always good to come on and chat football and sometimes it's therapeutic, and we probably need it with the sanity that City seem to steal from us as well as give us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, look, until then, looking forward to that one, and thank you for joining me for this episode.
My pleasure. It was good to chat. Lots going on.
Lots going on, absolutely. And look, thank you everyone for tuning in for this episode. Until next time, come on, City.